Hi, I am Tanya, 34 years old. Your parents will spend the rest of their lives living off my son's money. My mother-in-law announced loud enough for everyone at the Thanksgiving dinner to hear. The clinking of silverware against expensive porcelain plates abruptly stopped. The entire dining room suddenly fell into a dead silence. My sister-in-law smirked, waiting for the drama to unfold, while the other relatives exchanged confused glances. I glanced across the table. My husband's face was pale, his head bowed completely over his turkey plate. Instead of standing up to defend his in-laws' honor, the man I called my husband only bit his lip, avoided my gaze, and whispered cowardly, "Please, don't." But things had gone too far. All eyes at the table were fixed on me, expecting a piercing scream or a tearful loud argument. However, I didn't cry, nor did I even bother to raise my voice. I slowly put my napkin down on the table, smiled calmly, looked straight into my mother-in-law's arrogant eyes, and replied with exactly 6 words, "From today, you're on your own." She immediately froze mid-bite, the mocking smile stiffening on her face. My husband's head snapped up in sheer panic, but it was already too late. I stood up, put on my coat, and walked straight out the door, officially triggering the most ruthless financial purge to shatter the facade of prestige they had painstakingly built over the years. If you are also enduring the hypocrisy of a toxic in-law family and want to know how to strip ungrateful people of their power, hit the subscribe button to join me in this story. To understand why everything led to that exact moment, one must look behind the curtain of lies my husband maintained for 3 years. My parents, Arthur and Helen, are a retired teacher and a retired nurse. They live a quiet, disciplined life. They clip coupons, buy groceries in bulk, and drive a 15-year-old Toyota. My mother-in-law, Frances, always looked down on them. She frequently attended charity events and assumed my parents were practically destitute. The reality was the exact opposite. When Ryan and I bought our 4-bedroom suburban house, my parents quietly paid the entire down payment. It was a massive sum of money. Ryan could not stomach the idea of his family knowing his in-laws bought his home. He sat me down the day we signed the mortgage. He begged me to tell his relatives that the money came from our joint savings. I agreed. I chose to stay silent to protect his fragile ego. That was my first major mistake. As a chief financial officer, I manage money with absolute precision. I maintain separate accounts for fixed expenses and discretionary spending. I never intended to give Frances any access to my personal accounts. Ryan barely made enough as a retail bank teller to cover his own car loan and his portion of the utility bills. He had 0 disposable income. But a year into our marriage, Ryan came to my home office. He pleaded with me to add Frances as an authorized user on my primary credit card. He swore it would only be used for absolute emergencies. He argued that she was getting older and needed a reliable way to pay for her prescription medication and basic household items without carrying cash. He looked so desperate. It sounded reasonable at the time. I approved the request and handed him the physical card to give to her. The definition of an emergency quickly changed. The first month I noticed a charge for $200 at a premium pharmacy. I paid the bill and let it go. The second month, the transaction history shifted dramatically. The card was swiped at a luxury day spa for $400. 2 weeks later, a recurring charge appeared for a country club membership. Next came the weekly golf outings, expensive lunches, and shopping trips at high-end boutiques. Frances was actively funding a rich lifestyle using my direct deposits. I confronted Ryan the very day the first country club bill arrived in the mail. I printed the statement, highlighted the charges, and placed it on the kitchen island. I demanded an immediate explanation. Instead of picking up the phone to set boundaries with his mother, Ryan panicked. He paced around the kitchen, rubbing his temples, and started making excuses. He claimed Frances had a hard life and needed to keep up appearances with her wealthy social circle. He said confronting her would cause a massive family rift that he could not handle. Ryan lived his entire life just to please her. He was terrified of her disapproval. He begged me to let the charges slide. He promised he would pick up weekend shifts at the bank to pay me back for her expenses. He never worked a single weekend shift. I continued to pay the credit card balances because I earned more than enough to cover them, and I simply wanted peace in my home. I did not want to fight over money every single night. But Frances mistook my silence for weakness. Because Ryan claimed the house was bought with joint savings, and because he physically handed her the credit card, she genuinely believed her son was the sole provider. She firmly believed my income was just trivial pocket money. This delusion fueled her arrogance. She started making passive-aggressive remarks at family gatherings. She would glance at my mother's old car and offer to pay for a taxi so my parents would not break down. She would offer me her outdated designer clothes, pretending she was doing charity work. She constantly praised Ryan in front of the extended family for working so incredibly hard to support everyone. I swallowed my anger every single time. I kept the secret to maintain the facade Ryan so desperately needed. I paid for her luxury life while she routinely insulted my blood relatives. Last Thursday night in Frances's dining room, covered with an expensive silk tablecloth, my patience officially hit rock bottom. The evening was supposed to be a celebration of survival. Earlier this year, my mother received a devastating medical diagnosis. She spent the last 8 months fighting a severe form of cancer. It was a grueling process of chemotherapy, radiation, and endless hospital visits that completely drained both of my parents. They sacrificed their retirement savings to cover out-of-pocket medical expenses. 2 weeks ago, her oncologist finally gave us the news we had been praying to hear. She was officially in remission. To celebrate this massive milestone, I purchased a 2-week wellness and recovery retreat for her and my father. It was a premium health package at a specialized resort. I paid for the entire trip using my annual corporate bonus. It was a gift of healing, something they desperately needed. I handed the travel envelope to my mother in Frances's living room just an hour before the dinner started. Frances was sitting on the sofa nearby. She watched closely as my mother opened the envelope and read the itinerary out loud. Frances saw the name of the resort. She recognized the luxury brand immediately. Her posture instantly stiffened, as if she had been physically struck. I saw her eyes narrow as she processed the sheer cost of the trip. A sharp flash of jealousy crossed her face. She did not offer a single word of congratulations or relief regarding my mother surviving such a brutal disease. Instead, she tightened her lips, let out a short scoff, and walked away into the kitchen. When we finally sat down at the large dining table, the atmosphere felt heavy. Relatives passed around plates of turkey and engaged in casual conversations. Frances sat at the head of the table, sipping her wine. She strategically steered the group discussion toward the topic of financial stability, the burdens of modern life, and family obligations. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was setting a trap. Halfway through the main course, Frances picked up her wine glass. She tapped her silver spoon against the crystal rim to grab everyone's attention. The room fell quiet. She stood up slowly, smoothing the front of her dress. She swept her gaze across the table, making sure every single relative was paying attention. Then she put on a perfectly practiced passive-aggressive smile. She raised her glass in the air. "Some parents are incredibly lucky," Frances said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "They never have to worry about a single thing in their retirement because their daughter's husband pays for absolutely everything." After delivering that sentence, she turned her head and looked directly into my eyes. It was a deliberate, calculated public insult. She was completely dismissing my career, taking credit for my money, and labeling my cancer-surviving mother as a financial parasite feeding off Ryan's non-existent wealth. The sheer audacity of her statement paralyzed the room. I turned my head and looked straight at Ryan. He was sitting right next to me. This was the defining moment of our entire marriage. He knew the absolute truth. He knew my parents bought our house. He knew I funded his mother's country club lifestyle. He knew my bonus paid for the medical retreat. All he had to do was speak up. He just needed to say one sentence to correct his mother and defend my family. I waited for him to act. I waited for him to finally prioritize our marriage over his mother's approval. I just needed him to show a single ounce of courage. Instead of defending the truth, Ryan physically shrank into his chair. His deep-rooted fear of his mother overpowered any sense of loyalty he had toward me. He lowered his head, staring blankly at his plate of food. He refused to make eye contact. He just bit his lip and whispered a cowardly plea for me to stay quiet. In that split second, the remaining respect I had for my husband completely evaporated. I realized his cowardice was incurable. I did not yell. I did not argue. I simply placed my napkin on the table, smiled coldly at Francis, and delivered my final response. From today, you're on your own. I pushed my chair back, stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked straight out the front door. A chilling silence filled the car as I drove alone on the highway on Thanksgiving night. The dashboard clock glowed softly, marking the passing miles. I did not turn on the radio to drown out my thoughts. I did not shed a single tear. Women in my situation usually cry, scream, or hit the steering wheel in frustration. I felt none of those emotions. I only felt a profound, crystal clear sense of absolute relief. The quiet anger that had built up inside me over the last 3 years simply vanished. It was instantly replaced by the cold, calculating logic of a financial executive. Ryan chose his mother over our marriage and my family's dignity. He made his decision in front of a dozen people. Now I had to make mine. I pulled into the driveway of the large house my parents paid for. The property was completely dark and entirely quiet. I unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside the empty hallway. I did not bother turning on the main living room lights. I walked straight into the kitchen, grabbed a filter, and started the coffee maker. I needed the caffeine. I needed to stay perfectly alert for the task ahead. I stood patiently by the granite counter, watching the dark liquid drip slowly into my favorite mug. I took my hot black coffee and walked down the hallway directly into my home office. I set the mug down on the wooden desk and opened my laptop. The bright screen illuminated the dark, silent room. I was no longer playing the exhausting role of the dutiful, accommodating wife. I was a chief financial officer, and I was about to execute a massive corporate restructuring on my own household. I logged into my primary banking portal. The main dashboard loaded, displaying my Platinum credit card balance. I clicked on the account settings and navigated straight to the cardholder management tab. The system displayed the primary account holder, me, and the single authorized user, Francis. I stared at her name on the screen for a few seconds. I thought about the thousands of dollars she spent pretending to be a wealthy matriarch. I moved the cursor over the Remove Authorized User button. I clicked it firmly. A confirmation prompt popped up warning me that the secondary card would be deactivated immediately. I clicked Confirm. In less than 5 seconds, the physical piece of plastic sitting in Francis's designer purse became completely useless. Next, I opened the recurring payments dashboard. It was time to eliminate the unnecessary financial liabilities. I scrolled through the extensive list of monthly autopays. I located the direct debit mandate for the local country club. I hit cancel and deleted the merchant from my approved list. I moved down the list and found the Luxury Day Spa membership. I canceled that direct debit as well. I went through every single active subscription, premium membership, and recurring charge associated with Francis and terminated them one by one. I watched the projected monthly outflow drop drastically with every single click of the mouse. The financial pipeline was officially cut. The final step required precise calculation. I opened a new tab and logged into the joint checking account I shared with Ryan. I opened a digital spreadsheet alongside the browser window. I did not just drain the account out of blind spite. That would be messy and unprofessional. I operate strictly with facts and exact figures. I pulled up the recent transaction history. I calculated the exact amount of the payroll deposit I received just 2 days ago. Then I added my exact fixed contributions for the upcoming mortgage payment, the property taxes, and the shared utility bills. I tallied the exact sum down to the final cent. I initiated a domestic transfer. I moved my exact calculated amount out of the joint checking account and deposited it directly into my sole personal account. The web page refreshed instantly. The joint account balance plummeted. The only money left in that shared account was the exact amount of Ryan's last paycheck from the bank. It was a meager sum. It was barely enough to cover his own car insurance premium and a few tanks of gas for the month. It was certainly not enough to fund a country club lifestyle for his mother. I closed the spreadsheet and logged out of the banking portal. I shut the laptop. I picked up my mug and finished the last sip of my black coffee. On Friday morning, while the shopping malls were packed with people hunting for Black Friday sales, the first consequence arrived. I was sitting at my kitchen island with my laptop open when my cell phone began to ring. Ryan's name flashed across the digital display. I ignored the first call. He immediately called back. I let it ring again. By the fourth consecutive call, I finally pressed the answer button and put the phone on speaker. Ryan sounded completely frantic. His breathing was erratic. He told me Frances was currently standing at the checkout counter of a high-end department store. She had spent the last hour picking out discounted designer handbags and expensive cosmetics. When the cashier swiped her platinum card, the point-of-sale terminal flashed a red decline message. Frances told the cashier to run it again. She tried inserting the security chip. She tried tapping the card against the screen. The machine rejected every single attempt. The cashier eventually handed the plastic back and stated loudly that the account was inactive. A massive line of impatient holiday shoppers was standing right behind her. They watched the entire humiliating ordeal unfold. Frances abandoned the merchandise on the counter and fled the store in tears. She immediately called Ryan, demanding to know why her financial lifeline was suddenly severed. An hour later, Ryan burst through the front door of our house. He did not bother to take off his winter coat or his shoes. His face was red, and his jaw was clenched tight. He marched straight into the kitchen and slammed his car keys onto the granite counter. He completely lost his temper. He accused me of being vindictive, petty, and exceptionally cruel. He yelled that I intentionally humiliated his mother in public over a simple, harmless misunderstanding at a dinner party. He demanded that I log back into the banking portal right that second and reactivate her card. I let him finish his entire rant. I did not raise my voice to interrupt him. I did not defend my actions or argue about who was right. I simply turned my laptop screen toward him. I had a blank Excel spreadsheet open. Next to the computer, I had placed a thick stack of freshly printed documents. I arranged them in a neat row. First, there was his individual bank statement. Next was the official mortgage invoice. Beside that, I placed the property tax assessment, the auto insurance premium bill, and the monthly utility statements. Finally, I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out a basic digital calculator, and placed it directly on top of the paperwork. I am not reactivating the card, I said calmly, maintaining direct eye contact. Since your mother firmly believes you pay for everything, it is time for you to actually do it. Sit down. We are going to calculate your new budget. Ryan stared at me, completely confused by my calm demeanor. He reluctantly pulled out a bar stool and sat down. I handed him the printed bank statement showing his exact monthly direct deposit from his job as a bank teller. Type in your total monthly take-home pay, I instructed. He hesitated for a second, then typed $3,200 into the calculator. Now subtract your half of the mortgage, I said, sliding the housing bill across the counter toward him. He pressed the button, subtracting $1,400. Subtract your half of the insurance premium. He typed minus $350. Subtract your half of the electricity, gas, and water. He typed minus $250. I handed him a blank sheet of notepad paper and a pen. Now look at the remaining balance. Write down your estimated costs for your personal car loan, your weekly gas, your daily groceries, and your cell phone bill. Ryan pressed the equal button. He looked down at the final number on the small digital screen. His hands stopped moving. His face went completely pale. The remaining balance was practically zero. It was not even enough to cover a single afternoon at the day spa for Frances, let alone fund her monthly country club membership. He stared at the glowing screen in absolute silence. The sheer gravity of his financial reality finally crushed him. The heavy burden of actually providing for his mother now rested entirely on his shoulders. By Sunday afternoon, the situation had been completely twisted by Frances into a fabricated narrative where a cruel daughter-in-law was actively forbidding her son from fulfilling his filial duties, and the rumors quickly spread to the extended family. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a direct text message from Ryan's oldest aunt. She sent a massive paragraph reprimanding me for being excessively controlling, selfish, and blatantly disrespectful to my elders. She stated that Francis had called her crying hysterically that morning. The aunt accused me of financially trapping Ryan, monitoring his every move and forcing him to abandon his own mother just to satisfy my ego. She reminded me that Ryan worked incredibly hard at the bank, supposedly earning a massive salary, and had every right to spend his own hard-earned money to treat the woman who raised him. She demanded that I apologize to Francis immediately and stop interfering with their mother-son bond. I did not type out a defensive reply to her private message. I did not try to explain my side of the story or argue with her flawed logic. Arguing with extended relatives who operate strictly on blind emotion is a complete waste of time and energy. As a financial professional, I prefer to let concrete data speak for itself. I picked up my phone and opened my mobile banking application. I did not download the entire multi-page bank statement like I did during my confrontation with Ryan. That would be overwhelming and unnecessary for this specific audience. Instead, I carefully searched the transaction history and selected exactly 5 specific charges from the past month. I took 5 clean, high-resolution screenshots. I used the digital editing tool on my phone to draw a thick black box over my personal routing and account numbers to protect my privacy. Then, I used a bright red digital marker to circle the merchant names, the transaction dates, and the exact transaction amounts to ensure there was no room for misinterpretation. The first screenshot clearly displayed a charge for $450 at a luxury day spa. The second image showed a payment of $275 for premium green fees at a local golf course. The third was a shopping receipt from Nordstrom totaling $600. The fourth highlighted the recurring monthly membership due for the exclusive country club. The fifth and final screenshot was a dinner tab from a 5-star seafood restaurant for nearly $300. Every single image clearly showed my name printed at the very top of the official billing statement. I opened the main family group chat. This digital space included Ryan, Francis, my sister-in-law Eileen, and every single aunt and uncle on his side of the family. I uploaded the 5 redacted images directly into the chat thread. I did not write a long emotional paragraph defending my character. I typed exactly 1 single sentence to accompany the financial evidence. These expenses were all paid from my personal salary account. From today, Ryan will take over this responsibility. I pressed send. I set my phone face down on the wooden desk and walked away to pour myself a glass of water. I did not wait anxiously for the immediate backlash. A few minutes later, I walked back and picked the device up to check the read receipts. The small text at the bottom of the screen indicated that the message had been delivered and seen by every single active member of the family group. Absolute silence followed. Nobody typed a single word. The usual chaotic flow of daily messages, shared news articles, and family updates completely ceased. 10 minutes passed without a single notification, then 15 minutes. The digital silence was incredibly heavy. Finally, after 20 long minutes of absolute quiet, a new message notification popped up on my screen. It was from the exact same aunt who had scolded me privately just moments before. She had always been Francis's biggest supporter and firmly believed Ryan was a highly successful provider. Her message in the group chat was brief and visibly hesitant. Wait, Ryan really did not pay for any of these. Nobody answered her question. Nobody else chimed in to defend Francis. Ryan did not type a rebuttal to save face. Francis remained completely silent in the chat. In that exact moment, the elaborate mask of wealth and success they had worn for years shattered into pieces in front of their entire bloodline. The undeniable truth was finally exposed for everyone to see. The financial illusion was permanently destroyed. A month passed, and when the mid-December billing cycle arrived, the balance of power in the family truly shifted. The reality of our new financial arrangement finally hit Francis in the form of a physical letter. The postal worker delivered a thick envelope to her house bearing the gold-embossed logo of her exclusive country club. Inside the envelope was a polite but firm notice of suspension. Her account was officially frozen due to unpaid membership dues. The letter explicitly stated she was barred from entering the dining room utilizing the golf course facilities or attending the highly anticipated holiday charity gala. Frances panicked. She immediately called Ryan. She demanded he contact the billing department, pay the outstanding balance, and restore her social standing. Before her wealthy friends noticed her absence, she had to lie to her social circle, claiming she was suffering from a severe winter flu to hide the humiliating truth. She still refused to accept that the endless supply of money was permanently gone. Ryan desperately tried to absorb the massive financial impact. He was determined to prove he could handle the responsibility, but the sheer volume of his mother's expenses quickly suffocated his modest bank teller salary. He initiated severe personal austerity measures just to survive the month. His daily routine drastically changed. He completely stopped joining his coworkers for their standard restaurant lunches. Instead, he woke up 20 minutes early every morning to pack cold deli meat sandwiches and tap water into a reusable container, eating alone in his parked car to hide his sudden poverty. He logged into our television console and canceled his premium sports packages and his Netflix subscription, desperately trying to reclaim $20 here and $30 there. When those minor lifestyle cuts proved drastically insufficient to cover Frances's demands and his exact half of our household mortgage, Ryan resorted to liquidating his own possessions. One evening, I walked past the guest bedroom and saw him carefully cleaning his premium smartwatch. He took several photos of the device under the desk lamp. A few days later, he packed the watch into a small cardboard shipping box and printed a mailing label. He sold it to a stranger online for a fraction of its original retail value, just to gather enough cash to cover his mother's overdue luxury spa invoice and avoid her tearful phone calls. The immense stress of this daily financial juggling act began to physically deteriorate him. Dark circles permanently settled under his eyes. He lost weight. He stopped speaking during dinner, choosing instead to stare blankly at his phone screen, constantly refreshing his mobile banking application in hopes of finding a clerical error in his favor. But sheer willpower cannot overcome basic mathematical facts. By the end of December, the precarious house of cards completely collapsed. Ryan had quietly opened a new credit card with a predatory 24% interest rate to temporarily fund Frances's lifestyle, assuming he could pay it off gradually. The statement balance grew aggressively inflated by massive finance charges and a $35 late fee. The official due date arrived, and his checking account was entirely empty. He missed the payment completely. 30 days later, the situation escalated from a private struggle to a documented financial failure. The credit card issuer officially reported the missed minimum payment to the national credit bureaus. It was the first 30-day late mark of his entire adult life. A few days after the report was filed, an automated alert vibrated on his cell phone. His previously excellent credit score took a catastrophic plunge. The numerical drop was severe and immediate. I sat at the kitchen island quietly reviewing my own pristine investment portfolios, while Ryan sat on the living room sofa staring at the credit alert on his screen. He looked completely defeated. A damaged credit score in America is a heavy chain. He knew the drop instantly disqualified him from favorable interest rates, future car loans, or any emergency lines of credit. He was financially crippled. He did not ask me for help. He knew my bank was permanently closed. In that suffocating silence, the brutal reality finally washed over him. He realized the catastrophic price of his cowardice. He had actively sacrificed his own financial stability, his peace of mind, and his creditworthiness, just to protect an illusion. The heavy burden of his mother's vanity had finally crushed him, leaving him with absolutely nothing but debt and regret. Just 3 days before Christmas, the doorbell rang. I walked through the quiet hallway and looked through the glass pane. Frances was standing on my front porch. She did not look like the arrogant matriarch who usually commanded the room at holiday gatherings. She wore a simple faded wool coat instead of her signature expensive furs. Her posture was noticeably slouched, and the heavy makeup she normally wore was completely absent. In her hands, she carried a freshly baked pecan pie in a glass dish and a small, neatly wrapped gift box. In American culture, arriving unannounced at someone's doorstep with a homemade baked good is the ultimate gesture of total surrender. I unlocked the door and opened it. The freezing winter air rushed into the foyer. Frances did not try to push her way inside. She stood nervously on the welcome mat. She looked directly at my shoes before slowly bringing her eyes up to meet mine. "Tanya, I am so deeply sorry," Frances said. Her voice trembled, completely stripped of all its usual artificial sweetness. "I have spent the last month thinking about everything I said and did. I was completely out of line." I leaned against the doorframe and waited for her to continue. I did not interrupt her, or offer a polite dismissal to ease her discomfort. "I was jealous," Frances confessed, her voice dropping to a quiet whisper. "I looked at your parents, Arthur and Helen, and I saw a quiet, solid foundation that I never had. I wanted to feel important. I wanted to feel wealthy and respected by my social circle. When Ryan gave me that credit card, I got completely lost in the delusion that my son was this incredibly successful provider. I used your hard work to fund my own vanity, and then I punished you for it, because looking at you constantly reminded me that the money was never actually mine." It was the most honest string of sentences she had ever spoken in her entire life. She shifted her weight uncomfortably on the porch, clutching the pie dish tighter. She offered me the baked goods and the small gift box. I reached out and took them. Then, the inevitable pivot happened. Frances cleared her throat, looking incredibly desperate. "Ryan is suffering," she whispered, tears finally pooling in her eyes. "He looks sick. He is barely eating, and that new credit card debt is completely crushing him. I know I have absolutely no right to ask you for anything, but please, could you just reactivate the secondary card with a very small limit? Just to help him breathe a little bit. I promise I will only use it for basic groceries." The apology was genuine, but the underlying dependency had not changed. She was still looking for a financial savior to rescue them from the harsh consequences of their own actions. I held the warm glass pie dish in my hands. I looked at the woman who had spent 3 years mocking my family while spending my paycheck. I offered her a polite, highly controlled smile, but my eyes remained entirely firm and unyielding. "I accept your apology, Frances," I said evenly, "but the bank is closed." Her shoulders dropped immediately. The last sliver of hope vanished from her face. She did not argue. She did not cry or throw a tantrum. She simply nodded in quiet defeat, whispered a soft holiday greeting, turned around, and walked slowly back to her car. I closed the heavy front door and locked the deadbolt. The holidays arrived, and the new family order was permanently established. There was no magical financial reconciliation. Frances spent her winter listing her old designer handbags on internet resale platforms to pay for her own heating bills. She learned for the very first time how to live strictly within the confines of her actual income. Ryan spent his holidays picking up overtime shifts at the bank to aggressively pay down his high-interest debt. The harsh reality forced him to finally mature into a functional adult who could no longer hide behind his mother's approval or his wife's paycheck. I did not divorce him, but our marriage operates under completely different terms now. The financial boundary I drew that night remains a wall of solid steel. I protected my peace, my career, and the dignity of my family. I learned that true respect is never purchased with silent sacrifices. It is forged by setting absolute limits and having the courage to enforce them.